All right, we've roped in Ahren Posthumus, CEO and founder at Momint, to weigh in on this briefing. Of course, this is the briefing where NERSA has just been meeting with the portfolio committee there of electricity and energy. And we'll just get his sense of what he thinks about this particular appearance by NERSA, of course, as we get him on the line. Essentially, Eskom request of 36% was not met by NERSA, but they did, in effect, agree to a 12.7% electricity tariff increase, which takes effect, essentially, on the 1st of April. That's a few moments' time. Ahren, I believe we do have you now on the line. A very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. So the regulator had, on several occasions, we know this, made it clear that the purpose of the restructuring is not to increase Eskom's revenue necessarily. I mean, are you surprised that the Portfolio Committee on Electricity and Energy have now criticized NERSA's decision for the increase, whether it was below what Eskom asked for or not? I mean, just your reaction.
Yeah, look, I think what the public, what all of us are really worried about, and what we should be worried about, is that despite this increase not being what Eskom was asking for, Eskom was asking for above 30%. It's a ridiculous number, right? Now, they've been approved for 12.7%. That is still double inflation. And that's an important factor here, because we're not actually just talking about Eskom doing its job of providing power. We're talking about the fate and future of our economy, of the South African economy. We are already one of the most unequal economies in the world. And not having energy just puts more pressure on our economy. It makes it harder to do business. It makes it harder to generate revenue. That means that, inflation is now increasing because there's this inflationary pressure from the price increase. It's going to increase our cost of living. It's going to increase the cost of goods and services. And there's going to be less money sort of going around. So, yeah, like I say, I think NERSA should be facing some criticism from the public side. Certainly, I don't think they should be criticized on the other side for giving an increase that's less than what Eskom has asked for. Because NERSA's mandate, we have to remember, and this is from NERSA's documentation, in fact, is to ensure that electricity tariffs are fair and sustainable. NERSA's mandate is not in any way to ensure that Eskom is paid out for any of its blunders or its mistakes. NERSA's mandate is to make sure that the increases are fair and sustainable as a core word. And I don't believe it's sustainable for us to continue having these price increases as a country, as an economy, as a people. I don't think it is sustainable. So I still believe that this increase is potentially too high.
And I mean, I was going to ask you in terms of how crippling this increase will be for ordinary consumers, because the other argument, as you also rightfully put it, I think, saying that, while NERSA increased tariff, it has managed to mitigate the impact of the increased fixed charges Eskom had proposed by phasing it out over the next 3 years, sadly starting in just a few weeks' time. But just on that point, in terms of mitigating the devastation that we would have seen, how else would NERSA have dealt with this particular request?
Yeah, so, I mean, look, it's a difficult position for NERSA to be in, because ultimately they have to make decisions now off the back of where Eskom is as a corporation, as a public, good organization. And Eskom has made a number of blunders, right? Corruption has been uncovered, misspending, misallocation, operational inefficiencies. The list can go on. But the problem with something like that fixed tariff increase, or any increase, in fact, in electricity prices, is that it affects low-income homes disproportionately. And the reason for that is because low-income homes have fewer options. If you go into the fancy suburbs of South Africa, every home is sitting with solar panels on top of its roof. They are not affected necessarily by the increases in energy prices or fixed tariffs, for example. So again, that's why I brought up the problem in our economy, where we have such an unequal society. We have enormously wealthy and people who are living incredibly well in South Africa. And on the opposite end, we have many multiples more people who are really struggling. And those people are only going to suffer further due to these increases. and that's going to be very, very bad for our economy. So NERSA needs to seek alternative solutions to generating revenue, and it shouldn't come out of the people's pockets. I think that's the core argument against these increases is why should we as the South African population pay for Eskom's mismanagement? It doesn't seem fair.
And I mean, just on that point in terms of alternative solutions and also sources, I mean, what do you make of the explanation by NERSA in that clip that we've just seen, that one of the conditions for Eskom's tariff increase is to addressing unplanned power outages? Of course, this was also heavily criticized by the MPs, saying, well, that probably also just speaks to the maintenance level by the utility. I mean, just your take?
No, look, I mean, it's easy to villainize NERSA in this case, but I don't think we should do so because it's clear by their proposals that they are at least somewhat trying to look after the public's best interest. And this is a great example. We have to address that Eskom actually fixes load shedding, that they actually deliver power. I think it's completely we can't say that we're going to allow an increase in prices, but we're not going to attach conditions to make sure that you actually deliver power. Again, that would be completely unreasonable. So MPs certainly should not be against a move like this. It makes perfect sense to do so.
And as we look at other sources, I mean, what should in the main be Eskom's focus, essentially as we prepare and should be preparing for a more competitive environment in this space?
I'm so glad you used that word competitive, because that's exactly what I think we need to be shooting for. Part of the reason why Eskom is in the position that it is today is because they were a government-created monopoly. There is no competition in the market for power. Now, I think the government has made incredibly positive moves to change that. There have been incredibly strong shifts to change that with all of the tax benefits that you get, for example, if you invest in alternative energy sources like solar. There's really, really incredible tax benefits that I think the public should be aware of. And one of the funny things here is actually that as Eskom makes more blunders or increases prices or continues not to deliver power, owners of these solar generators only continue to do better and better. And that's why you've got so many platforms and people spinning up that allow people to make investments in solar, like our platform Momint, offering people fractional autonomous investment into solar. And I think that's a really, really good thing for the country. Again, circling back around to our economy.
Yeah.
It really is about the fate of our economy. And if we're going to have a future as an economy, it's very clear right now that we have to reduce our reliance on Eskom in whatever way possible. I think there's a good, strong argument to say, look, moving away from Eskom actually hinders their revenue even further. And I understand, that stance of that argument, but when it comes time to pay the piper, I think there's no avoiding that. And again, I will reiterate, I don't think it is the people of South Africa that should be fitting that bill. You asked a question I haven't answered yet, which is what should Eskom be focusing on? This is my professional opinion, and it's shared by many of the energy experts when we have these kinds of discussions. I think it's quite universally sort of agreed that Eskom needs to focus on its wheeling capabilities, which it's started to do now. So for the public who doesn't know what that means, I can generate power and put it back into the grid, for example, and I can make some money from that. So allowing individual companies, people and everyone to become the producers, because Eskom hasn't done the best job of being that producer. Now, to be clear, we're always going to need them. Yeah. You can't distribute power between cities without that infrastructure, and they need to manage that. So instead of splitting their focus, my belief is that they should focus purely on generation and storage. Storage is going to be an incredibly important component as well, especially if we're relying on renewable energy sources.
All right, Ahren, thank you so much for that. And of course, just your take on the solutions on the table. I really do appreciate your time. Ahren Posthumus, there, CEO and founder at Momint, to just weigh in on NERSA appearing there before the Portfolio Committee of Electricity.